On May 16th, 17th, and 18th, 1911, Little Rock hosted the 21st Annual United Confederate Veterans Reunion. The event held special significance, for it marked the 50th anniversary of the American Civil War. Thousands of veterans from across the nation converged upon Little Rock for this momentous event, arriving mostly by railroad. The veterans were greeted with open arms and dazzled with pageantry.
When you had these throngs of veterans that were exiting the rail cars and at the stations here in Little Rock, one of the first things they saw was just the tremendous amount of decorations that covered literally all of the stores and buildings within the city. There were just hundreds of flags and bunting of red, white, and blue, and also pictures of Southern generals and Southern heroes that adorned, bank buildings and the city hall and various hotels and such. And so the city was festooned with all kinds of decorations. Clearly, it was a festival atmosphere, and it was a tremendously colorful city at the time based on the number of decorations. And those decorations figured heavily in the pageantry of the parade.
The city made great efforts to decorate the city. I mean, they really appeal to the businesses and the people in town to make themselves look good. And so they spared no expense in decorating what they sometimes call Confederate Way, or the parade route.
And the parade, like the parade for all UCV reunions, was the climax of the event. And Little Rock certainly did herself proud with the parade in 1911.
The parade was the last really official event of the reunion to be held on the last day. And they had initially created a route that was shorter than the one that they actually walked on and rode on. And the reason for that was because so many people showed up and so many people were involved in the parade that they felt like they needed a longer route. But actually they started on Markham Street, the Markham Street that runs in front of the old State House, and the side streets, and would come down Markham Street where there was a review stand for the veterans in the old State House. Down by the Marion Hotel was the reviewing stand for the hierarchy of the UCV, the guy in charge. They went down Markham Street, they turned right on Main.
The grand reviewing stand was at 5th and Main. It went on down to the Camp Shaver at City Park. And then it circled and it came back and looped back down Main Street and then back to the State House. So at some point you actually had two parades. You had one going one way and one going the other as the group that had reached the camp were returning and coming back. It is probably the largest parade, I think, ever in the history of Arkansas.
It was noted that it took an hour and 45 minutes for the parade to go past one single point. So you can kind of give you a feel for just how long the parade was. One of the really unique and eye-catching aspects of the parade route were the 60 white plaster columns that adorned both sides of the parade route. And these were not only decorated with flags and bunting, but they were very eye-catching.
You had remarkable stories and images, and it was widely photographed. The remnants of Nathan Bedford Forrest Cavalry, for instance, was in Little Rock and rode their horses in this parade. So you had mounted, uniformed Confederate cavalrymen, many of them in their 80s, long beards.
So you had these old veterans marching and the bands and the various banners and the floats. There were some floats, particularly one that carried the queen of the event. Her name was Kathleen Barkman. And then you had her entourage, and then there were various other delegates and visitors and the Sons of Confederate Veterans and UDC.
During the reunion, the SCV, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and the United Daughters of the Confederacy, an older organization, they all did exist and participated in the parade. Like in conventions where you have a convention in town, you have a host committee or a host group. The one that sets up the arrangements, they're probably more responsible for the local arrangements than the UCV would have been.
Most of the veterans marched in the parade. The parade route was over 3 miles in length. And you have to realize that this was in May of 1911, a warm day, And a lot of these old veterans whose average age was 75 were going to march 3 miles. There were special tents and accommodations made to make sure that there was plenty of water in case the veterans got overheated.
There was one very elderly soldier who had been a drummer boy during the war, and he was photographed in the camp with his drum. He was in the parade, and he collapsed in the heat because it's May and it's hot in Arkansas in May, we know that. And wearing these wool gray uniforms, and that brought the parade to a halt for a minute, and the old other veterans pulled him aside, and his recorded words were, "Please just help me to my feet. I'll finish this march or I'll die in the attempt." And that was, I think, symbolic of how important this event was to so many of these old veterans. A lot of them knew this would be their last reunion, and it was really important that they be there. It was important that they be able to finish this parade, and the poor man could not finish his march. His heart was willing, but his body wasn't.
To kind of give you a magnitude of the people that were on the streets, it was estimated that over 100,000 people were either involved or were watching the parade. And there were throngs of people all over the sidewalks, 5 to 7 people deep. There were special grandstands that were made that were filled up very quickly. People watched the parade route from windows and atop buildings all along the parade route. There were people that were climbing the top telephone poles to watch the event. Of the 12,000 veterans, it was estimated that almost 10,000 were involved in the parade, most of which marched. Of course, you had the newfangled automobiles that were also quite a unique addition to the parade. So you had horses and horse-drawn carriages and automobiles all mixed together. It just must have been a tremendous event. And again, you have to realize that the average age of these veterans that were doing this 3-mile march in the fairly warm day on May the 18th, 1911 was 75. But these were spry old fellows that were going to make sure that they represented themselves well by still being able to march like they did back in 61 to 65.